This is a Let's Talk Church Safety and Security microsode with your host, Paul Buckner. So this is really, it's a follow-up video to the one I did about being prepared. Be prepared to be the bad guy, be prepared to be ridiculed, be prepared to be made fun of. So there was a recent incident. If you haven't watched that video, you can go back and watch it. I'm going to do a basic recap. There was what looked like a real firearm and was being pointed by somebody the size of an adult. There were children reacting to it and screaming, and the person had driven to that location. A lot of earmarks of this could be an adult that actually has, it looks like a real weapon, and it's an airsoft weapon, but it's not an actual firearm. So the gal that called me and was telling me about this happening at her office, it wasn't a church, but I think this is very pertinent. A lot of the violence that happens at churches starts in the parking lot, over 60%, last statistics I've seen, but a lot of it actually happens outside of normal business hours. You've got an aggressive person, they're wanting a handout. You've got somebody that's an emotionally disturbed person that's showing up at your campus, and they might genuinely be needing help, but they've made their way to the front doors. They're trying to force their way inside. Maybe you have the policy of locking your doors and letting people in on a case-by-case basis. Maybe you have an open door policy. Occasionally I encounter churches that still don't lock their doors, which generally they change that pretty quickly because they've probably had their entire sound system and all their instruments stolen. That's a common way that people stop doing that, unfortunately. But whatever your policy is, they're trying to gain access to the building. And this lady was asking me about her office complex. She was like, I'm really concerned for my safety. Like, what if somebody tries to force their way in, and they have to interact with customers, receipts are given, different things like this at their counter, and they have the typical door that's really not strongly reinforced, that's in a pine wood frame that, you sneeze hard and you've broken the door open. They have a barrier between them, but it's plexiglass. It's probably more than a lot of churches actually have, right? So you've got somebody that's aggressive, and now they're trying to, let's say that you have some kind of a physical barrier, and they're trying to force their way through it. Your church probably doesn't have a security presence around the clock. It probably doesn't have a security presence during the week. Some churches do. A very, very close friend of mine that works in church security, and it's a paid position for him. That's becoming a thing, especially with larger campuses. And he goes to a multi-site church. And so he is at a location within the building, and people are coming through, and he's watching and looking in case by case as they come through. A lot of them, he's apparently buzzing people in his case, but he is armed in uniform security. A lot of churches can't afford that. A lot of churches can't afford any paid security at all, or don't. And so, giving you this scenario, have you as a safety team discussed these things with pastors, discussed these things with staff to say, because forewarned is forearmed. Like, what do you do? Have you played through scenarios with them and asked them these questions? Have you hired a church security professional to come in? I can recommend some darn good ones, and to walk through these scenarios with your staff and say, okay, have you gone to John Riley and talked to de-escalation and had him come into your church to try to de-escalate people? And it's not just for your safety team, right? De-escalation is for everyone in every application of life, but it's also for, I can tell you from personal experience, I have fewer arguments with my wife, and it's not that we really argued that much anyway, but going through significant de-escalation training. I have yet to train with John Riley, which is frustrating, but I consider him a mentor in that regard. He's given me advice any number of times on de-escalation. And so as my de-escalation game has gotten better and better, I find myself even having fewer arguments, even with my wife. Like, we're much less likely to let a moment where a harsh word is said, and then we're much more likely to take a step back and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to come off that way, and vice versa, right? Have you gone through de-escalation with your office? Have you gone through a plan to evacuate the lobby or the office or whatever, and to create barriers between the threat that's trying to force their way in the doors or whatever. Have you talked about these things? Do you have things in place that they could use to protect themselves with whether that's, you know, they can hit a panic button and now law enforcement is on the way, whether that's, you know, I've literally turned to people, they're like, you know, please do a security walkthrough with us. We're not allowed to have weapons in this complex, church or otherwise. And I've done security walkthroughs as a consultant, and those are fun. How do we protect this ministry, this office, whatever? And we have a fire extinguisher there, and you have an umbrella there. You have this here. There's things that you can use to create barriers. You know, shut this door. You know, pull this filing cabinet over, and where I can feel the weight of it. I'm like, two ladies can easily, you know, whatever you can do to slow people down. Have you discussed these things with your church? If you have an office staff or you have staff on site during the week, because again, forewarned is forearmed. If they probably haven't thought about it, they don't have any real direction on it, and a lot of people don't know what they can or can't do. Like this lady that called me, she said, well, I've been told I can't have a gun here. And I said, well, the law in this state is this, and so you can. Now, if she defends herself with that firearm, they may decide to fire her. But you know what? I would rather my wife have to look. It's not my wife that called me, obviously, but I'd rather my wife have to look for another job than be dead or receive grievous bodily harm from someone, right? The number of sexual assaults against females, males as well, but primarily against females on church campuses is terrifying. If you ever look at the statistics on that, and that should be a place in our minds, we think of that as being a safe place. So having those conversations and forewarning and forearming, right? Because, like in her case, she didn't even know what she could do. I said, you have no duty to retreat. You are lawfully there. I said, now my encouragement would be go from this point, because I know their office, go from this point, go around the corner, shut this door, start creating barriers between you and them as they're forcing their way through, and try to effect a retreat, evacuate yourself from that environment. That said, a lot of people don't even know what they can or can't do. I've had people say, well, I can't shoot somebody that's coming at me unarmed. Well, in this case, you're female, you're smaller and not as strong as them. They're aggressive. They've broken through a barrier. They're threatening you. You actually, in this state, have the right to defend yourself, because you don't know what they're going to do, but you are in fear for your life and or your safety from grievous bodily harm. It varies by state. You need to know your state laws, but it made her feel a lot more comfortable to know, hey, I do have the right to defend myself. I said, you know, you have the right in this state to plant both feet, to present your firearm, and to put rounds into that person to defend yourself. I said, you have no duty to retreat in this state. That said, I would encourage you to try to get away from them and create distance and create barriers. And they're fortunate they have cameras there, so anybody doing something, as long as the DVR remains in place, anybody doing something like that is going to be recorded from several angles, and try to effect an escape. The cars are parked close by. If you're creating barriers, and you can get out another door if you know there's just one threat. So we had a really good conversation about that, and she now has an idea of what she might be able to do in case something really bad pops off. And that really made me think about, circling back to stuff I've talked about it. There's a lot of great voices out in the church safety space that are talking about these things, but it's something to swing back around to and think about. Oh, maybe we talked about this 8 or 10 years ago, but we haven't talked to the 2 or 3 new people on staff. We haven't had that conversation. Maybe it's time. So I won't belabor the point. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. What's one we haven't done in a while? Keep your powder dry. Keep yourself in good shape. And keep your equipment in good shape. I went through my law enforcement equipment yesterday, and I was checking on a long gun, and one of the lights, I have 2 different lights for it's a story for another time, but the higher lumen light was dead. Make sure that you keep your equipment in good shape. I had a doctor's appointment the other day, and when I did, I am now 46 years young, and when I had this conversation with a nurse practitioner, she says, you're actually very healthy for your age. Your blood pressure's good, your heart's in good shape, and so we were talking about, you know, I'm pretty skinny for being in my mid-40s, and I try to stay that way because I intend to go the distance. I can't protect the flock. I can't protect my family. I can't be there as a loving, fatherly, grandfatherly spiritual advisor, and I sure as heck can't be a chaplain if I'm dead. I cannot be there for my family. And I'm now moving into this mental role of, I want to become the elder statesman of my family. We had one that passed away recently. And so that just kind of gushed out of me as I was thinking about this, but he really had a very positive influence on me. And he wasn't related to me by blood, but many times we talked and he treated me very well, even though he didn't have to. And I miss the guy. And so take care of yourself, keep your powder dry, keep yourself in good condition, because I'm telling you, I was talking to a young man the other day that's significantly younger than me and was having serious heart problems. And we cannot protect our families if we're combat ineffective. I don't want to die, and I've talked about this before, but I don't want to have a heart attack and die running to the sound of the guns, and my last thought being, I should have taken better care of myself. As I'm dying, I'm watching people I love, die or be harmed. No way. Not if I can help it. So keep your powder dry. God bless. If you enjoyed this microsode, check out the video and audio versions of the Let's Talk Church Safety and Security podcast.